ahead and briefly kick us off tonight. Wanted to thank everyone that is here. This is just a topic that is so near and dear to my heart of talking about self-love and self-acceptance because going through breast cancer is extremely traumatic. And going through something like that not only affects you physically, but mentally. And so, as an ambassador of the Heirs Foundation, we're always brainstorming new events to bring resources to the breast cancer community. And so, self love and self acceptance, I just am so excited for this discussion tonight to hear from so many other breast cancer survivors and thrivers, and just a little bit more about their journey and how it has been for them navigating the mental impacts of breast cancer and how to really grow through that self-acceptance phase. So I'm going to hand it over to Morgan and Tamara to tell us a little bit about the Heirs Foundation and what they're all about.
So I'm Morgan Hare. I'm a co-founder and I'm also the board chair of the Heirs Foundation. And we started the foundation because we wanted to give a voice to something we thought had no voice. And when we started asking people to talk about reconstructive surgery, we really realized that people really weren't talking about it 10 years ago. And that's really why we started it, to really be a resource and support system for the women who've had mastectomies due to breast cancer or a genetic mutation, to educate them about their reconstruction options. And if they couldn't meet their copays or had no insurance, is to help pay for their reconstructive surgery.
Thank you so much, Morgan. So all of our panelists here tonight, if you found out about this event through Heirs or through me or through one of our panelists, you may have read a little bit on each of them, but they all have very unique and diverse stories about their own breast cancer journeys. And tonight, the one kind of theme that's going to weave, I think, as a commonality, but also unique experience is talking about how self-esteem and self-love and self-acceptance both mentally and physically played into each of their roles. And so to get us started, we're going to go around and hear from each of our panelists a little bit about them, who they are, their passions, and how cancer may have impacted their self-esteem or their body image. Janet, can you start us off? And then we'll go to Michelle next.
Sure. So I have a very long family history of breast and ovarian cancer because we have the genetic mutation that runs rampant through my family. And over a decade ago, I was genetically tested. And upon that, I entered a journey that I really, although my family, had been through, when you're going through it without having cancer and knowing about this mutation, was a journey that was quite lonely. So I became very involved with community because I relied on community for support. Ultimately, I've had a decade of working with breast cancer patients since, and I now, having had a mastectomy many years later, I now work in an advocacy role as an ambassador for Heirs. And I also work for a breast reconstruction site on Long Island, New York. And I made this my life's work.
Thank you, Janet. And I'm curious, we'll talk because I think Tamara is 10 years out as well. So we have two very long-term thrivers on. I know that's inspirational to all of us. Michelle, tell us a little bit about yourself and then, what role cancer played in your self-esteem and body image kind of experience.
Yeah, so before my introduction, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Anna and the Heirs Foundation. Thank you so much for having me on today's panel. In terms of my introduction, my name is Michelle, and I am a 3-year cancer survivor. I was diagnosed when I was 27 years old, and I think my story is really unique in that before my diagnosis, I was managing a cancer center, and breast cancer did not run in my family. So in terms of my passions, I love paying it forward back to the cancer community through my work and my career. In terms of my passions outside of breast cancer, I love to travel. I'm from New York City and recently moved to LA. So I love exploring the West Coast as of late. And in terms of self-esteem, for me, before cancer, my favorite physical feature used to be my hair. And then through chemotherapy, I lost it all. And I think, just long story short, cancer taught me that my favorite thing about myself is no longer my hair, it's my thick skin. So we'll definitely get into more details throughout the panel.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. And just moving to LA, I'm going to jump to Rachel then. She's also in California, so maybe you guys could meet up at some point. Rachel, tell us a little bit about yourself and just what role cancer may have played or how it may have impacted you from a self-esteem or body image standpoint.
For sure. Well, Rachelle, I would love to meet up with you. I'm in Orange County, so most def. So my name is Rachel. I was diagnosed in 2020 at 29 years old. I'm also a young cancer survivor. I've been in remission as of 2021. I feel like the biggest way that I feel like self-love, self-body acceptance, all of that happened on a much higher level after cancer. I feel like pre-cancer, I just cared too much about my body image, how I look, like every detail about me. I've been working in the beauty and fashion industry for the last 10 years. And so that puts additional pressure on image. But I feel like post-cancer, and I'm sure everyone on here can agree, you just kind of gain this like courage and the strength that comes, you know, from within. And it's just this crazy tenacity, you know, where I don't care what people think. And I've become so much more loving and accepting towards who I am and my body and, you know, my mindset. And, you know, just like everyone else on here, it's like, I feel like mentally I've become so much stronger. And I feel like that just pours into everything that I do. And I feel like because mentally I'm so much stronger, it exudes confidence in everything that I do. And I think it's just that, you know, it's the realization that life is short. Life is short, and, you know, would never have thought at 29 I'd be dealing with this. But now at 31, you know, coming on to 32, like life has been great. And I plan to keep it that way.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, I'm already like feeling inspired. Okay. Aisha, am I saying your name correctly? I know some of these are my Instagram friends, and this is like our first time actually like meeting. So please correct me if your name is wrong and tell us a little bit about yourself, and as well as kind of how everybody else has, what role, you know, self-esteem and acceptance played in your own cancer journey.
Okay. Hi, Anna, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. You did say my name right. It's Aisha. Like Michelle and Rachelle, I was diagnosed as a young person. I was 30 years old. I've been married for 10 years and I have 4 kiddos. So hearing you have cancer was the biggest shock of my life. In fact, I just didn't even think that young people got cancer. So when I found the lumps in my breast, I walked around with them for months before I finally went to the doctor. And because of that, now I advocate for young people because I believe that there's a huge lack of education in our age group. And we really deserve to have better education so that, you know, we go to the doctor sooner, we do our self-exams, and so on and so forth. So this is also my life's work. I'm so dedicated to being an advocate. This work is hard, but I love it. And I'm so grateful to have opportunities like this to share my story and talk on these topics. In regards to self-love, I have chosen to radically love myself despite what I see sometimes in the mirror, because it is really hard sometimes to see the scars and the lopsidedness of my breast and how hard they feel now compared to the softness that they had in the past. So, but my body's been through so much. It has not let me down once. It's continuing to heal. And so I radically choose to love myself no matter how hard it is, no matter, you know, what it looks like. And it's such an ongoing process. It's not perfect. But I'm grateful for this body because it's been through the ringer and it continues to show up and take me through the hardest storm. So again, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this panel tonight.
Thank you so much. I mean, I love that you spoke to this sense of radical acceptance, whether you're feeling it in the moment or not, because I think that is probably so relatable. I mean, I know it is for me. It's like, okay, I wasn't very nice to myself today. Like, I need to start over. I need to try again. Like, why am I treating myself like this? It's not that you're always going to have the right language for yourself or your body or that mindset, but how do we do that every day over and over again? because of what we've been through. I love that. That was so wonderful. Let's go over to Tamara. Tamara, we are talking to each of our panelists a little bit about kind of who you are, what are your passions. Morgan did a really brief introduction of you about your role to heirs, but can you share, a little bit about your own cancer story briefly? And then also just, what role or how did cancer impact your self-esteem or self-love as you were going through?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. It was great meeting you in person, being able to share our stories. And my name is Tamara Sieger, and I am the Patient Advocacy and Patient Services Director for the Heirs Foundation, where we help women after mastectomy try to regain their physical and emotional healing, both physically and emotionally. As you know, it's a very difficult process for both. Been there for several years in that role, but what led me to that is my own battle with cancer and recovery and triumph over cancer as a thriver. And at the age of 39, I was diagnosed with a highly aggressive triple positive breast cancer, and young diagnosis, and went through chemo and radiation and Herceptin antibody treatments, and subsequently rolled right into reconstruction. And with that, had a latissimus flap, multiple revision surgeries, and thought I was pretty much finished, and finished with being the patient. But last year I started over with a deep flap and had some issues with radiation. And so I'm now about 10 surgeries in. I have one to go. So while you think you're so far in your recovery, which I am, but sometimes you find yourself, repeating some things and finding that it's a process, and it's a lifelong process for a lot of women. But, I'm really happy to be here talking about love, especially self-love. I love this topic. It's certainly a journey. It's been a journey for me. It's a continued journey. But I think that, when I think about love, I think about it being an action verb, and it's really an inside job for us to have to take on ourselves and focus on our own recovery and being positive and, creating the life that we want and who we want to be when we look in the mirror, not just physically. The physicality of breast cancer is very traumatic, but when I look in the mirror, I want to see who I am and like who I am, from a physical, emotional, spiritual, mental perspective, just constantly trying to better myself, and certainly use my experience to help bring some hope to other women who are going through this.
Wonderful. And I think, like Morgan spoke to at the beginning, Tamara is one of the patient kind of services advocate that speaks to a lot of the applicants that come through heirs for grants and resources. And so being able to, I heard each and every one of you on the panel tonight speaking about how your own experience with cancer challenged you and inspired you to become advocates for others. And I think I share that passion with you. So it's so wonderful to be able to be here and talk about that together. Aisha, I want to go back to something that you talked about with, this radical self-love and radical acceptance. And one of our kind of questions for the panel is, what resources or thinking helped you during this emotional healing? Can you kick us off, Aisha, about how did you get to that standpoint of thinking about it in a sense of radical self-love and radical acceptance? And maybe some of us can learn from that as well.
Absolutely. So, first of all, therapy, that was the biggest thing. And, with this question, I really was giving it some thought, and there were not a lot of resources out there. Like, it's hard to Google, like, how to love your body after you go through cancer. So therapy definitely helped. And my therapist had really encouraged me to take it as, instead of this big thing, like, I have to love myself now. I've gone through cancer. I've got all these scars. My mental health is not the same. Instead, how do I make small decisions every day that can retrain my brain and lead me back to a healthier place? And so sometimes for me, that looks like, okay, I'm kind of let me bless my body with a green smoothie. It's a small act of love to myself. When I'm looking at the scars and I'm kind of going down that rabbit trail of, wow, my body looks so beat up. Well, what other things do I love about my body? How could I turn it into a moment of gratitude and thank my body for the way that it's carried me through this journey? Another thing that was very pivotal for me is when I was going through, I guess I had surgery. It was after surgery. It was a really low point for me. I booked an Airbnb, just myself. And I remember I sat in front of the mirror, basically, vulnerable moment, completely naked. And I remember just crying and crying because it was so emotional to see like everything my body had gone through. But I took that moment to just say, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And now, when I'm going through that downward spiral again, turning it into gratitude and thanking our bodies. You've carried me. You've really helped me through it all, and you're still healing. And I'm going to love on you in the biggest and smallest ways possible. Those things have helped me so much. And it's not perfect. Like every day I have to literally choose. I'm going to love myself, even though I'm gaining weight through this freaking menopause. And it's, like I don't always love what I see in the mirror, but I'm still saying, I love you because you're my body and you really show up for me.
Oh, I love that. Michelle and then Janet, both of you all kind of spoke to finding acceptance in similar ways too. What resources, Michelle and then Janet, really spoke to you or helped you, or were there certain, words of affirmation, anything that really helped you along the way?
Yeah, Anna, so I completely echo everything that Aisha was saying, therapy. And for me, I think it's a thought process that I had to practice. So I think in and statements, not but statements. And what I mean by that is when you think in and statements, for example, let's say you're really upset about your scars and your hair that you lost. The but statement would be something along the lines of, I'm really sad about my scars, my body changes, my weight fluctuation, but I'm going to try to overcome this and just really try to be positive. And when you say a but statement, you're pressuring yourself to feel one thing. And that's what society expects of us, to be strong and to really go for the overcoming feeling. But I try to think in and statements because that allows you to feel two things at one time. You can feel really empowered, but you can also feel really sad about the changes that are going on in your body due to cancers. So that's one thought process. And then another thought process that I have is, for me personally, for my self-love journey, for the 27 years of my life, I never prioritized my relationship with myself. It wasn't until after cancer that I tried to self-love. So when I look at the 27 years versus the 4 years of not, it's a really huge, drastic number. And when I think about cancer, cancer can also be really drastic, and it's not always bad memories. It can be used as a positive reminder. So when I have a lot of negative self-talk due to cancer, just a lot of like sad feelings, cancer kind of always lingers in the back of my mind.
You have to go out.
And it reminds me to be positive. So those are two thought processes that kind of help me get through it all.
Oh my gosh, those are like, I'm going to be reading the transcript of this later. Like, okay, we're going to need the takeaways, because I love that, the and statement, right? I mean, you can't be completely vulnerable, completely down. Sorry, getting over a cold here, and be working on yourself, right? Like, I mean, to your point, Aisha, what you said too, like I can be here in front of the mirror and be upset about my scars and my body and be extremely grateful for having gotten to this point. That's so powerful. Thank you. Janet, what about for you? What was, kind of most healing or helpful in terms of resources and mindset for you?
So, my experience was a little bit different in that I had planned a mastectomy right on the heels of having my ovaries taken out and immediately going into surgical menopause at 39. And, what I had experienced was an incredible weight gain right after that procedure. And I had to take a moment and say, I really didn't know if I was ready to proceed with an elective mastectomy at that point. I was feeling so terrible about myself, my weight, my body image. And I had to take that time to really work on myself. And I found that, allowing myself that 30 minutes a day. I was a full-time working mom. We all know how incredibly valuable, 30 minutes in the day is to say, I'm going to tune everybody out now, kids. You can go take care of yourselves, or leave your partner or your spouse and just sit with yourself for 30 minutes. And so I had to reprogram myself and learn how to love myself to really embark upon the next chapter of my life, because that was going to be even more detrimental to my self-image. So what I really started to practice are things like meditation, taking that 30-minute walk, and being okay that I was prioritizing myself and that it wasn't selfish. Of course, my phones were ringing, everybody needed me, my kids needed me, but I had to take that time for myself in order to prepare and to really start sitting within myself again and loving who I was. And that journey continued after I had the mastectomy. Of course, losing sensation in your breast, having a deep flap at a time when it wasn't as advanced as it is today. And it was a very long and quite honestly painful experience at that time. It took a lot of learning to figure out who I was, how to love yourself, how to look at the world again, and just feel okay so that I can be in a body that I was happy with. And ultimately that did happen, but it takes a lot of spiritual work.
I love that. And thank you, Janet, for speaking to the importance of like the time and the intentionality that it takes. I think, I hear from women a lot, or, anyone that's gone through cancer, that, just kind of hoping it will happen and like, when will I find this acceptance? But I think so many of you have spoken to the fact that it takes like setting aside intentional time to build a relationship with yourself and kind of figure out what that looks like. So thank you so much. Rachel, back to you. I really want to dig into this kind of, you've been in the beauty field, and we live in a world that is like extremely beauty appearance focused, but you talked about, being able to, through this experience, kind of reset your mindset of what was important. Was there anything, mindset wise or resources, or where did that confidence come from in terms of being able to make that shift mentally as you were going through cancer or even after?
So for me, I was left in a pretty devastating situation after I was in remission. I was married for 7 years, and I found out that my ex-husband was being unfaithful for a long time, for many, many, many years. And so it led quickly to a divorce as soon as I went into remission. And you can only imagine how much I spiraled after finding all of that out, because during that time, all throughout my 20s, he was my rock. I found a lot of confidence in knowing that I had someone by my side, who I thought was loyal, who was with me till the end. So to find all of this out it shattered me completely. And so I think being broken so vulnerably 2 times within the past 2 years, it just built up this strong mental state of mine. And I think that's really when I started focusing on like what's internal. And now, being single and being in the dating world, I think what I found is my strongest asset, and what attracts other people to me, and I can confidently say this, is what's internally inside of me. And I continue to use that over and over and over. And I show up with the confidence that's within me and acknowledge that I possess and the high EQ that I have. And I rely completely on this. And the physical things can come, and, I love to take care of myself and this, that, and the other. But I find myself focusing less on that and finding myself focusing so much more on the internal strength that I have and everything that I've overcome. And I find that that's what makes me attractive. And I fully, I put everything into that. And I live by that code now. Whereas before I knew that, yeah, internally I'm beautiful, but I focus so much externally. But I think understanding the things that I've been through and understanding that, I can't take my health for granted. I can't take, even my love life for granted. And, I've been through some pretty hard things, as has everyone here on this platform. I think that's kind of what possessed, that strength of mine. And I think learning that, this was an attractive quality I continue to tap into it. And I'm just so unapologetically me. And I love who I am internally. And that's what I like to build every single day. That's what I look forward to it. You know, even days that I feel insecure and I feel physically ugly, I'm like, you know what? It's all good. Because inside I know who I am and I'm confident in that. And whether someone else likes it or not, I like it. And I know that that's what's attractive. And I think for me being, you know, on this single period and, you know, just enjoying my life right now, it's so fun. And I've never been so content with myself than I am right now, honestly.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And if there are some single people on, I know that is a highly requested topic as well. Is like, what is it like to date after breast cancer? What is it like to put yourself out there again? And I think, you know, again, what I've heard as a common theme among everyone, you know, Rachel and everyone that's spoken, is this concept of vulnerability. And really going through cancer puts you in this space of being at your most vulnerable. And in the chat, you know, someone's asking and talking about kind of mourning this prior self that you used to be, and saying like, that was a different version of me, and that's okay to say goodbye. Like Rachel, you said, you know, you kind of were broken in multiple ways, and then you're able to kind of come forward from this. So that's extremely powerful. Thank you. I know people will gain such wonderful support from that and inspiration. Gosh, we already have to kind of like wrap up the panel in a few minutes to have time for some questions. But Tamara, you know, being further out from your experience, I know it's never ending. You and I both were sharing war stories from our many, many surgeries. How do you incorporate some of those habits, you know, for self-acceptance, for self-love, that so many of us have talked about tonight? How do you incorporate those into your life now, maybe being in a different position than you were at the time of diagnosis?
Right. Well, at the time of diagnosis, you know, my children were also younger, and I know it's, you know, it's a different stage of my life. I'm also single, and I'm able to maybe take the time to prioritize myself a little bit more than what I did initially. But, you know, I will say just the maturity of having the benefit of some time. I mean, time doesn't heal everything, but it's what you do in that time. And, you know, just spending more time with the positive affirmations, with prioritizing that self-care that we've all talked about, and really finding something that brings you joy. You know, one thing I heard is we need to practice joy strength. And it's like we go to the gym and we try to get stronger. And each day you get stronger. Well, you can't go into the gym the first day and pick up, you know, really heavy weights. You have to start with the small weights. And so trying to build a capacity for joy in your life, because when you're dealing with so much stress and anxiety, it's really important to make room for joy and to really practice joy strength. And what I mean by that is each day find something that really brings you happiness, that makes you feel authentically who you are, makes you enjoy your day, and makes you feel good about who you are. And so, you know, I've had enough time to practice a lot of things and figure out what works for me and what doesn't work for me. But joy strength, you know, the more joy you practice and the more you incorporate that into your life, the more it becomes a way of life, and the easier it comes as time progresses.
I love that. I'm going to hold on to that. My joy strength. I talk about that, a similar concept with confidence, right? And I think a lot of what we're speaking to tonight is that confidence of feeling okay with yourself. And I speak to it the same way, Tamara, of like, this is a muscle you have to exercise. It doesn't happen overnight. And it's also not just an end point where you get there and you're like, oh, I'm here. Great. I'm confident. Moving on. Like I can go back to all my bad habits. No, I mean, I think each of you spoke to, you know, I'm going to wake up every day. And Aisha, you mentioned this. I'm going to wake up every day and make a decision for my body, for my loving myself, and making this decision over and over again. I love that. And Tamara, you have inspired me. Painting is one thing that brings me joy, and I have not done it in a long time. So I was just telling myself today, like, you need to get back to painting and something for you. And so I love that you mentioned that. Aisha, what about you? You know, you spoke to kind of some of these things that you do on a daily basis, you know, whether that's green smoothie. I know you also moved out into the country. So if you're not following Aisha, it's awesome to see all the kind of like the animals and like that kind of homesteading lifestyle, what are some of those habits that you build in, for your self-care and these habits long term?
So long term, I definitely, after cancer, made a decision. I'm going to live life on my terms and I'm going to just take all the risk. And so moving to the country was really like, that was a product of that decision. Like, I'm going to just risk it and go on fun adventures and really enjoy my life. And I can't even lie, I'm having a chemo brain moment. Will you repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
No, that was great. It was really just like, what are some of those
Okay.
habits that you've built into your life to maintain what you kind of have been speaking to was important in your experience of finding that acceptance? And so I think you spoke to that a lot already,
Okay.
but is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah. And I think just briefly, just the intentionality, I can't remember exactly who was saying this, but like doing things that bring you joy, like intentionally, I'm putting this in the calendar so my husband and my whole family know I'm doing this for me so that I can do something to enjoy my life, not as mom, not as wife, not as cancer survivor, just things that Aisha loves to do. And I think that's so important as well.
I love that. And I think, Janet, I'm going to hop over to you because you mentioned how important that was for your own recovery as well, of saying, even as a mom, even as a working, professional, I have to carve out this time. What have some of those habits looked like long term for you? And while you're on that, one of our questions, because we're going to transition into our Q&A portion, one of our questions was specifically talking about from someone in the chat, what is the process of self-acceptance looked like in terms of modeling for your children? If you had children as you were going through that, how do you kind of show them what that looks like? So Janet, kick us off. I know that was a three-tiered question.
Yeah, that's okay. I think, one of the things that most of us are guilty of as women is we think we have to multitask and accomplish everything in a day. And we feel bad about not crossing off everything on that to-do list. And, one of the things that I've learned about self-acceptance is it's okay. Just if your list doesn't get done, it doesn't get done. And you don't need to feel guilty about it. Nobody's putting that pressure on you but yourself. It's like when I counsel breast cancer patients who are about to go to surgery, everyone thinks they need to clean out their attic and that spice cabinet that they haven't touched in 20 years because they're not going to be able to do it when they get back. But it's been that way for 20 years. So does it need to be really, done now? Or can you take that hour and spend it differently on yourself to help prepare you for surgery, right? So I think self-acceptance is a big part of not putting so much pressure on yourself. As women, we do it often. We're all guilty of it, right? So that's one thing. And not to feel guilty about it with friends. I love that Aisha went and she went away by herself. That's beautiful. If I could, reverse back, 12 years, I did take that 30 minutes. I learned how to do that for myself, but it would, it took time. I wish I had gone away like Aisha did. We should all learn from that. That's really self-acceptance and being okay to leave that to-do list. As far as setting an example and in regards to children, it's very ironic for someone like myself at this point in life. I have a 17-year-old daughter and I have a 21-year-old daughter. And my 21-year-old is about to get tested to see if she carries the genetic mutation. And my 17-year-old will be soon to follow. And they know about my journey. And as young little girls, they saw me. They saw my breasts. They saw my scars. They wondered what they were. And I did see somebody in the chat, how do you portray, your self-image in front of your children when you need to be strong for them? And, it comes with time. And when your children see you well and loving them and loving yourself, they feel so much more confident. And it's hard, believe me, it's hard. I too stood in the mirror and cried and had no feeling and had, setbacks with infections from surgeries and all of that. And yet I had to take care of, at the time, a 4-year-old and a newborn. And it's hard. It is. But you have to set the example for them, because now fast forward, I have 2 very strong children that are about to embark upon their journeys. And they know that they've seen their mother. I mean, I've certainly made my fair share of mistakes and cried in the closet, but they've seen me be okay. I'm okay. I did what I needed to do as a mother to be here to raise them. And hopefully they will take some of that experience and their own journey will be as successful.
I love that. And I think, like you spoke to, like, it's okay to not be okay and not know what to say in every instance. And Lillian just said, I'm a little bit scared of showing my daughter the scars that I have. I mean, I think that's huge. I mean, the first time my son touched my scars, and he's 3, it's like, Mommy, what are these? Like, yours don't look like mine, And so how do you begin to have those conversations? I think, like you said, Janet, it's just about giving yourself the space to find that comfort alone. Sometimes it might be crying in the bathroom in the closet alone, and then coming out and saying, hey, let's have a discussion about this, and knowing, like, it doesn't have to be the right words every time. Yeah. Tamara, what about you? I know you also, I think, had children at the time of your diagnosis. Anything you would want to add to that in terms of, modeling that acceptance?
Well, I had sons, so it was a little bit different in terms of, the ages that they were at the time of my diagnosis. But now that I am a little bit older, I have 3 granddaughters, and they're 5, 2, and 1. And the 5-year-old, has seen my scars, and she has asked questions. And, I think that just being confident with them and, age appropriate for whatever age they might be, but just sharing with them, I said, Mimi was sick at one time, but now I'm well. And, she sees that resilience. I think that even if she couldn't put a word to it at 5 years old, I think they see it's okay to be different and to have, something that maybe it doesn't look exactly like her, but I think just being honest and upfront about what you've been through and the resilience that it's taken to just overcome and triumph over things. I think children pick up on more than what you really think that they do. So, and going back, I don't think I would do anything different, with my sons. It was a tough age. They were teenagers, but just trying to love yourself. I mean, I never was one to have self-pity. I have compassion for myself for what I went through. I think that's very important in the journey to self-love, is to have compassion for yourself, but I never had self-pity. And I think modeling that, and that, everybody faces obstacles, and you just have to face them head on with courage and just overcome and take the next thing that life throws at you and then make the best of it. I think that's kind of what we talked about here, and all of us trying to use what we've gone through and just really to make it mean something, because we've all been through a lot, and there's a lot of people that go through a lot of things. And I think to take what you've been through and try to make it mean something in your life, and also be some positive, inspiration for other people that they can see, I'm 12 years out and look, I'm living, breathing, my life is going great. I'm happier than I've ever been. And I think that there's hope for women that are in the thick of it, because you kind of lose perspective sometimes. You forget how far you've come unless you really take note of all of the things that have happened along the way. It's easy to forget when it's been 12 years how hard those particular moments in time were in treatment and surgeries and recovery. And I think it's really important to document, journal your feelings, and then be able to look back and celebrate all the milestones and really how far you've come through it, because we've overcome a lot.
That's so true, Tamara. And I think, everyone has spoken to that tonight. It has not been an easy journey, I think, for anyone on the call to get to the place of self-acceptance. And, I've heard from each of you that it's really taken time, and that intentionality, and finding ways to build it into like your lifestyle and your mindset. I think so many times, we hear self-love and it's like, oh yeah, go take a bubble bath, or, go get your nails done. And it is so much more than that. I think what you've heard from the women tonight, it is prioritizing your mental health. It's making the time for yourself alone. It's going to the doctors for checkups. It's having a dialogue with yourself each day about how am I going to recommit to myself, and making time to cry. And all of those things, right, where that's part of your healing. So thank you so much to each person that has shared that. I think we did have just a couple other questions I did want to ask the group, and I don't know particularly if this applies to anyone, but someone had asked, speaking of like things like nipple tattoos or other options, as part of the reconstruction process, have any of the panelists had that done, and did that play a role at all in your kind of self-acceptance journey? I know I did not, so I can't speak to that personally.
I mean, I work for a reconstructive plastic surgery site in New York, and I represent 8 different plastic surgeons, 8 or 9. So I do see a lot of patients because I advocate for those women. And we perform 3D tattoos, and I've, circulated with many 3D tattoo artists around the country. It is a very personal decision to do nipple tattooing. I will say the women that have done the tattooing feel a sense of complete when they look in the mirror, but that looks like something different for everybody in the mirror. It doesn't mean that if you don't have nipple tattoos that you shouldn't feel complete, because it comes from within. This is an aesthetic procedure that I think helps many, many women bring this to closure for them. And I think it's helped lots of women psychologically.
I love that you touched on that, Janet, that it is an option and can be so powerful, but it's not a need to have, right? I mean, I think at least in my case, and when I was first diagnosed, again, 27, similar to Michelle and similar to Rachel as well, I was like, I'm going to go through all my recon surgeries, and I'm going to go to Vinnie Myers in DC, and I'm going to get the nipple tattoos. And I had this like, this is my icing on the cake. And then you get into it and you're like, oh, I have a lot of emotional healing to do before I'm even ready to consider that. And by the time 5 years later, I was ready to consider the tattoos, I was like, you know what? I actually really like this body. Like, I actually like not wearing bras and not having anything show through my white shirts. And, so I think being open to that, you may change your mind, and that it's okay. Like, we are allowed to evolve as part of our cancer recovery. And I think each of the women tonight spoke to that as well, of like, even when you're in a really difficult place, you have the power to control small things, and you have the power to shift your thinking. And I think that has just stood out so much tonight.
Yeah. See women that come back years later for their tattoos, and they come back with a different sense of themselves. They're like, oh, I just want to have fun with this now. They're in a different headspace. So it's whatever works for you. Some women need it up front to feel like they're trying to feel complete, and others come back years later. It's such a variety of decision making.
Oh, I love that. Aisha and Michelle, I'm going to come back to you all to kind of close out our panel and Q&A. We had a question at the very beginning about someone, I think the name was Uza, I'm probably mispronouncing it, asking, just had a friend diagnosed. How can I best support as a friend, as a loved one? Aisha, what would you share, now having gone through your own experience or looking to a friend, how would you kind of suggest being the most supportive?
Yeah, so my best advice is to ask your friend what they need and then do those things, because you can show up in a million ways, but they are going to be the best ones to tell you exactly what they need. But like when I got first diagnosed, I didn't really know what I needed, and everybody was asking me, and it was really hard to even process. So in that moment, it's like, people need food. They're probably going to need maybe some household chores done, things like that, or support. And sometimes just saying, I love you and I'm here for you. And whenever you do know what you need, I'm going to be the one to do it is going to help so much. So definitely ask, and then think about the basic things that you can do to help them. And listen as much as possible, because you probably don't know what they're going through. And so it's okay to just say, wow, that is so hard, but I'm here for you. And I'm so sorry you're going through this.
That's fantastic. Michelle, what about you? What would you add, to the friend of the newly diagnosed?
I completely agree with Aisha. And just to add on that, I'm going to go back to my experience and think of what my friends did for me. And one thing that my friend did meant the world. When it comes to cancer, when you go through it, you fully understand all aspects of it. But if you're not the one going through it, it's hard to understand every single piece. So she said one thing that always stuck with me, and I love her for this. She said, I don't know how to respond. I don't know exactly what to say, but please know, like, I need you to be in the driver's seat, and I need you to tell me what your expectations are with our friendship throughout your journey, and I'm here for you. And so for her to be really honest, like, I don't know how to respond to that. I don't feel educated enough to really help you through this in a sense of cancer, but I'm here for you in whatever style or whatever way you need. And that really resonated with me.
Well, thank you guys so much. And a particular thank you to, to Airs for hosting this, and to all of our panelists. I think you guys brought so much value, and I know our attendees will probably follow up with you with more questions. So thank you all so much for your time tonight. And I hope this was inspirational for you, and that you can get some rest and self-care tonight. Thank you all.